Today, we're going to travel back in time about 2,600 years to a city that was on the verge of tearing itself apart. We're going to see how they pulled themselves back from the brink by inventing something totally radical, a government run by ordinary people. But before we dive into all that history, let's start with a big question. How do you actually create a fair society? Like, who should get to make the rules? And how do you stop the most powerful people from just taking over everything?
Well, this isn't some new debate. Way back, the Greek city-state of Athens was about to collapse over this exact same problem.
So picture this. Athenian society was pretty much split right down the middle. You had a handful of super rich families who owned all the best land and made all the rules. And then you had everybody else, mostly poor farmers who were just trying to get by. These rulers were called aristocrats, and their power wasn't something they earned. They were just born into it. It was so bad that if a farmer had a bad harvest and couldn't pay what he owed, an aristocrat could literally have him and his entire family sold into slavery. The whole city was basically a ticking time bomb. The people of Athens knew something had to give. If they didn't fix things, they were headed straight for a civil war. This is where a few brave leaders step into the story to try and fix what was a very broken system. Okay, so here's a quick roadmap of where we're going. We're going to follow three key figures who, piece by piece, helped move Athens from being ruled by just a few people to being ruled by many. First up on our list, a guy named Draco. So around 621 BC, a lawmaker named Draco gets the job of sorting things out. And his big idea seemed pretty logical. See, before him, the laws weren't written down anywhere. Only the aristocrats knew what they were. So Draco's solution was to write them all down for everyone to see. Simple, right? Well, there was a bit of a catch. Turns out Draco's laws were incredibly harsh. The punishment for pretty much everything, from stealing an apple to just being lazy, was death. Yeah, it's really no wonder that people said his laws weren't written in ink, they were written in blood. And get this, his name actually gave us a word we still use, draconian. Whenever you hear that, it means a rule is super harsh or severe. So, yeah, writing down the laws was a step forward, but Draco's way of doing it definitely did not solve the fairness problem. Okay, so a few decades later, a new leader named Solon tries a different angle. He gets rid of all debts and completely bans debt slavery, which was huge. He also set up a system where political power was based on how much wealth you had, not just what family you were born into. This was a massive improvement, for sure. But it still kind of left the poorest citizens out in the cold, and Athens stayed pretty unstable. After Solon, things got a little chaotic for a while. You had these powerful guys called tyrants who would just seize control. But once that period was over, the stage was set for the biggest, most radical change yet, all thanks to a man who's often called the father of Athenian democracy, Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes saw that the real problem was that society was built around these super powerful, wealthy families. His solution? To completely rewire how society was organized. He got rid of the old tribes that were based on family and created 10 brand new ones. And here's the brilliant part. He deliberately mixed people from the city, the coast, and the countryside into each tribe. This totally shattered the aristocrats' power base. And then he did something nobody had ever done before. He gave every single male citizen an equal vote on every single law. The Greeks needed a name for this revolutionary new system, and they came up with democratia. It comes from two words, demos, which means the people, and kratos, meaning power or rule. So literally, rule by the people. This was it, the birth of democracy. So rule by the people sounds amazing. But what did it actually look like? In practice. How did it all work from day to day? Well, the heart of this new system was the assembly. I want you to imagine a giant outdoor meeting on a hillside where any male citizen over 18 could just show up to debate and vote on, well, everything. Whether to go to war, how to set taxes, you name it. And decisions were made with a simple show of hands. This is what we call a direct democracy. See, today, most of us vote for people to represent us, but in Athens, they voted on the laws themselves. Now, for all the day-to-day government business, they had something called the Council of 500. But here's the craziest part. The members weren't elected. They were chosen completely by lottery. The Athenians figured that elections would always favor the rich and famous, but a lottery?
That gave any citizen, rich or poor, a fair chance to serve in the government for a year. It was a really clever way to stop any one person from getting too much power.
And they applied that same logic to their courts. Cases weren't decided by a single judge. Nope, they were heard by these massive juries of at least 501 citizens. You might be wondering, why so many? Well, it made it almost impossible to bribe or threaten them. It was all about making sure justice was truly in the hands of the people. And they had one final kinda wild safety feature called ostracism. You can think of it like a citywide vote-off. Once a year, citizens could write a name on a piece of pottery. And if enough people wrote the same name, that person would be banished from the city for 10 years. Not because they committed a crime, but just because they were getting a little too popular or too powerful for comfort. Okay, this all sounds incredibly advanced, especially for its time. But there is a really, really important question we have to ask. When they said rule by the people, who did they actually consider to be the people? And when you actually break down the population of Athens, the reality is pretty shocking. The citizens, the ones with actual voting rights, made up only about 15% of the people living there, just a tiny minority.
This means that while Athenian democracy was absolutely revolutionary, it was also deeply exclusive. Women had zero political rights. Foreigners who lived and worked in the city had no say. And the largest group, the enslaved people who did most of the work to keep the city running, had no voice at all. But even with those very serious flaws, we can't lose sight of just how radical this whole thing was. For the first time in recorded history, the idea that a government's power should come from its ordinary citizens, not from gods or kings or a handful of rich guys, had actually taken root. And the legacy of Athens is all around us today. The very idea that people should vote for their leaders, the concept of a trial by a jury of your peers, the importance of being able to speak freely in public debate. All of these ideas can be traced right back to ancient Athens. Heck, even words we use all the time like politics, aristocracy, and of course democracy come directly from them. So, Athens created the first blueprint for democracy. They proved that rule by the people was possible, even if their definition of the people was way too small. And that leaves us with a big question for our own time, doesn't it? After 2,500 years of progress, what does a truly fair and inclusive democracy really look like today?